Hello, good morning, and welcome to today's daily devotional on Luke. We're up to Luke chapter 2, verses 1 to 7 today, which is looking at the birth of Jesus, which is super exciting. I was going to wear Christmassy attire for that, but I didn't want to take away from the point I'm going to make, so I didn't. But Christmas is coming. Happy days. With the birth of Christ, it is obviously a very significant moment, and there's a lot that could be spoken about. I could speak about the wonder of the great mystery of how that comes to be, that God becomes incarnate in a little baby. I could talk about all the prophecy in the Old Testament that leads up to this moment. I could talk about all the awesome things that happen as a result of this moment, the life, the ministry, the death, and the resurrection of Christ. But what I want to talk about today is something which is perhaps a little less grand, but no less miraculous. It is the humanity of Christ, the fact that God is human in this. The passage describes the birth of Christ, and the passage starts with government bureaucracy. There's a census being carried out, and so everyone has to go to their town. I sure hope there isn't much government bureaucracy in heaven, so I'm going to count that as a human thing. That seems fairly human. And in fact, in Luke chapter 1, we saw quite a lot of supernatural things, divine things. We saw angels and visitations, and this guy was struck mute for 9 months, and mad things. And later on in chapter 2, we get some more angels coming to visit the shepherds and things. In this specific passage, in this moment, the birth of Christ, there's none of that. There's no angels, there's no fanfare, there's no choir of saints bursting forth. It's just a human moment. And I love that because it is an undeniably holy moment. We cannot deny the holiness of this moment. It is the birth of Christ, but it is human. It is fully human and yet fully divine. And that is the nature of Christ. Christ was, and is to come fully human and yet fully God. So that's where I'm going with this. That's the point I want to drill home. Because being human then cannot disqualify us from holiness. If Christ is fully human yet fully God, then us being human cannot disqualify us from holiness. Sometimes we think of being human meaning being broken and evil and sinful. And yes, there is a sinful nature to the flesh, but being human is being made in God's image. And it means being like Christ. If Christ was fully human, and us being human relates us to Christ. We're made in the image of God. Yes, we are made of the same stuff as Adam and Eve and every other sinner to walk the face of the earth. Yes, we're made of the same stuff as Adam and Eve were made of when they ate from the tree that they weren't supposed to eat from and they were disobedient. But we're also made of the same stuff as Jesus Christ by being human. And we're made of the same stuff as Adam and Eve were made of when God looked down upon the earth and said that it was very good. So do not despise your humanity. Do not regret being human. Do not regret or despise your weaknesses or your strengths, your passions or your weariness, your hopes or your fears. It is not wrong to be human. Jesus was human. And in his life, he experienced joy and sadness, strength and weakness, hope and yes, even fear. If you look to the Garden of Gethsemane before the crucifixion, he sort of appeals to the Father, if it's your will, take this cup away from me. And then he sort of recommits himself to following the will of God, but he does have that moment of what you might call fear or even weakness. Being human does not disqualify you from holiness. In fact, it is the opposite. It is in our humanness that Christ meets us in order to take us to divinity. Being human does not disqualify us from holiness. In fact, it is the opposite. It is in our humanness that Christ meets us in order to bring us to divinity. So if anyone's watching this and you're a human, take comfort. You are good. You are made in the image of God. You are of the same stuff as Christ. And also, there is no excuse. As in, let there not be anyone any longer saying things like, but I'm too weak, too emotional, too tired, too human for God to use me. Because that didn't stop Christ. And it doesn't need to stop you. God can and will use and transform you for his purposes, his plans. So I would encourage you now, I would ask you, please, to take just a few moments of quiet after this. Perhaps you need to forgive yourself for being human, for being sad or weak or weary sometimes. Or perhaps you need to ask God to forgive you for you putting up excuses in front of his plans for you. He has great plans for you. He has great plans for all of us. And yet sometimes we kind of say, but not me, God, because, I'm this and I'm that. And perhaps you just want to marvel at the wonder and mystery of Christ as fully human, fully God, of all of the prophecy that led up to this moment and all the awesomeness that comes out of it. Maybe that's what you want to take away from this passage, and that's fine. I'd encourage you to just take a few moments even, just to reflect on that now before you start the day. So thanks for listening. Grace and peace to you all. Amen.